Good morning. Sorry, I'm having trouble on my computer with Teams, so I'm joining on my phone, but once I can get that figured out, I'll switch back over. How is everyone this morning?
Doing very well. Alright, so with that, I think I can run through our quick administrative items to get us going. As you likely know, these meetings are recorded and will be posted to the Insight YouTube channel. We appreciate if people sign in. We have a sign-in sheet physically in the room, here at the door. If you're online, we would appreciate it if you would enter your name and information in the chat so we can get that recorded correctly. And just conventions, we may be outnumbered by folks attending online versus in the room, so be sure to direct your conversations towards the middle because those are the eyes and ears of our online participants. And with that, I think I can hand it over to you, Amber.
All right, well, good morning. Welcome to the Community Outreach and Engagement Committee meeting. We've got great, exciting agenda items today. Excited to hear about the Washington State HEAL Act and other topics. So Josh, can you help me with having folks introduce themselves in the room, and then we can go online. I'm Amber Waldriff. I'm a representative of Heart of America Northwest on the Hanford board.
Right in the room, start with me. My name's John Patnow, support the HAB facilitation team. Doug Miller.
I'm Ryan Miller. I'm the communications manager for Ecology's nuclear waste program.
Ben Pruitt, community outreach and environmental education specialist for Ecology.
Brett Harvey, HAB support.
Kathy Dubois, non-union, non-management.
Rob Davis, from the city of Pasco.
Roberto Amijo, review block manager for EPA.
Susan Coleman, public at large. And I'm gonna make a request for everybody. I've got old ears and I don't have hearing aid. So I would, sometimes the conversations get real low, they're soft spoken. Please speak up. And I know I actually had feedback from on the line also from people off online that they have trouble hearing also. If you're soft spoken, please put the effort out. As you can tell, I'm not.
Okay, so Colleen Draker, HMIS, support tab. Laura Caulfield, Capline, HAB support. Ian Tripp, Department of Energy, DDFO.
Dan Calloway, HMIS Communications.
That's current audience around the table today. Going down the names I see on Teams. Open your microphone and introduce yourself. We'll start with Anna.
Ana Grisel Alvarez, Department of Ecology.
Yeah.
She wrote it in there.
Yeah, she did. Cynthia Downs, HMS Portfolio Planning. Dan.
Dan Solitz, member of the public. Good morning.
Jane.
Jane LePage, Washington Department of Health.
Liz.
I can't tell if you said Liz or Chris. Do you say Liz?
Liz, yes.
This is Liz Matson with Hanford Challenge. Good morning.
Good morning. Dana.
Dana McFadden with Ecology.
Tom.
Tom Rogers, Washington State Department of Health.
And Sarah.
Sarah Williams, Department of Ecology.
We have one person attending by phone. Would you like to introduce yourself? I think that's everyone.
Super quick, Amber, just as a heads up on the agenda, and for everyone else too, we're gonna have to shift a little bit on the plan just because Heather Dale, who's gonna be a big part of the discussion for the open house stuff, is double booked and has another board event until 10:30. So I was hoping, depending on how long our public involvement topic goes, that we could just scoop subcommittee business up in front of that until Heather is able to make it.
So you want to move what do you want to move on the agenda then? Or just have that at the end?
No, she'll be able to be here hopefully at like 10:40, so just like a half hour later. So if we can do subcommittee business after public involvement, then should be enough time.
Okay. So we'll still start with the public involvement activities. And then you're saying, we may just have to start at 10:30 about the open house event partnering. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if we have too much of a gap, we can just kind of talk about any subcommittee business rather than waiting for that at the end of the day.
Okay,
Just
sounds good.
yeah.
Sounds like a plan. Okay, well, let's jump into it to get an update on upcoming TPA public involvement activities. And I know we have folks from HMIS and ecology and who do we have on from, who's there with EPA? I'm sorry, I didn't catch everybody when they were introducing themselves.
Me, Roberta.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Who wants to start?
Yeah.
I want to start. I have a full slate and it's
Oh
all
my
in flux. And I will use my big girl voice. So, and put on my passion killer so I don't miss anything. For those of you that are paying attention, you will notice that in a flash, we threw out a temporary work authorization, a pre-notice, and launched a comment period over Labor Day weekend, which was a great team effort. I'm so grateful we were able to get that done. And what happened was we were going to do some melter heat up, and the permit allowed both melters to heat up simultaneously, and we needed to adjust that to be a little more on the cautious side, to maybe heat one up and then the next to not fully strain them so much in the initial environmental testing to check on the emissions. And so you'll see that that comment period is listed on the handout here. That one got launched on September 2nd. The temporary work authorization went out August 29th. This will conclude November 1st. We have the public meeting presentation heading to headquarters. That public meeting presentation will be provided October 6th, and Matt Irwin, who is our assistant manager for the waste treatment and immobilization plant, will provide that himself because of course there's great interest and excitement about making glass. So we look forward to that being our next big meeting. Will be here at the library, 5:30 p.m. October 6th. Now, so thank you to all who worked hard on that. The next one we talked about a little bit yesterday is we have a TPA comment period that will be 45 days with a meeting that the agencies have all agreed to. And it's going to be about working on the milestones. Now that we have the holistic agreement that puts a lot of emphasis and money into WTP, cleaning up tank waste, and we have some milestones coming due as early as 2026. We are proposing retiring those milestones, aligning the timing of that with the decisions in the holistic agreement and what's in the life cycle cost and schedule report, and then just replacing those with a new with a new milestone series. And so there's quite a bit of talk going with the agencies. There's been good discussion with the tribes. And so we're thinking of trying to get that going as early as this late fall. And so for everything I go forward here, I'd just like to add the unknowns of, we don't know exactly what's happening at headquarters, and we have some appointees that have not made it through Congress. We are aware that there'll be some changing in the EM1 slot. People will need to change signature authority, and we don't know how our scheduling will be impacted. And now I saw in a big flash in the hallway the other day, maybe some of you have seen him, I saw someone who resembled Ray Geimer. I believe he is on the morning of day 3. And is flashing around, getting, his boots on the ground and getting going. And I think his background at Hanford, his good attitude, he is well versed with his work at the 222S lab, what our risks are, what we can do, what we shouldn't do. I think that his background will be terrifically beneficial to us. With that said, much of what we want to do here, he's getting up to speed on naturally. So that will impact some of the schedule for these things we're talking about here. So we're hoping to get this TPA 45-day comment period launched in the late fall, have a meeting. We're looking at hopefully as early as either early November or early December if that schedule slips. And then there was some talk about maybe having an extra virtual meeting, which might be a reasonable thing if there's interest and turnout. And I think those things can all be considered. We will have to factor in those other things I mentioned. So I have a lot in the works and just a little unsure about exact timing on these things. And I'm not trying to be evasive or difficult. We just have, we'll just have to give the new people a chance to get in their seats and decide what we're doing and when. So we also have the Circle 5-year review queuing up. We've got some newspaper ads, some public notices, and we're hoping to get that launched in November. And that one takes a while. Roberto can tell us more about that, but that one will run all the way through until the summer of 2027. Now on Hanford.gov, you can go to a web page, and you're welcome to queue it up, Josh, if you have time. Type in the CERCLA 5-year review, and we have a web page that's going to show you all of the prior 5-year reviews if you'd like to look at those. And then, Roberto, did you have more you'd like to share with on that particular one?
Not particularly. You kind of really touched on it, you mentioned, so yeah, good job.
And then I think part of this involves some community interviews. So we might be looking at our HAB members for some of those interviews. So work on that one's a bit of an ongoing thing. So we'll make sure I don't see any hold up with that. I think that one will probably just, it normally launches in November, concludes about a little more than a year later in the summer, and we'll try to keep to that schedule. And then any other, before I move on, Ryan, did you want to add any other thoughts to these things?
No.
All right, now this brings us down to one of my all-time favorites and one of the things that have very often gives us great participation on, and that is the 5-year plan. Normally we come out with the 5-year plan right at the top of the fiscal year, and we always try to align the public meeting with a full HAB meeting. This year, for those reasons I mentioned, it's a little bit behind, not extensively behind. I believe it's with the assistant managers right now, so it's moving ahead, but it's taking a little longer for the reasons I mentioned, but also for some good reasons. So first of all, we have some sparkly new branding that you'll be seeing coming out in the public notices, the PowerPoints, some things that show that Hanford field office now that we moved away from RL and ORP and getting in more of the One Hanford branding in there. We have the things that have come out of the holistic agreement will be incorporated into the 5-year plan, which means it will look a little less consistent than what it did in years past, because all that change will be in there. And maybe some of these milestone things we'll be talking about too. And then lastly, of course, our new COE site manager will need to have a little time to look at this. I believe we are scheduled with him to meet on this week or next. But how that was laid out in part was how Brian Vance wanted that to be. You know, he was very hardworking, was very involved with anything to do with sharing things with the public. And so we need to make sure that Mr. Geimer has the same opportunity to work on that. So for that reason, and then it will need headquarter review and approval. For that reason, we're thinking we will launch this comment period in January as opposed to in the top of the fiscal year, and then align the public meeting with the full HAB. And in part of our thinking with this too, not only wanting to get the extra spit and polish on that and get it through the reviews, but I know the HAB membership packet is a little bit up in the air right this minute, and I want to make sure we can align this meeting when we've got HAB members in town who've had paid travel. And I think in mid-January, if we line that up on the first day of your meeting, which is the 14th or the 13th.
Yep. We'll get the for sure date, but yes.
Placeholders are January 14th and 15th.
Yeah, so the 14th would be the night of the meeting. I still haven't got the gallery room, but that's our plan there, and that's why it's just a little later than normal, because I want to make sure everyone from HAB can be there. And that one, like I said, will be a little different than what we've had in the past because of all the new advancements. And we might have more to say about, how the glass making and the shipping of waste to Utah and Texas are going, and so that should be good. And do any other thoughts or questions about that one before we move on?
So that's that.
Real quick, the 5-year, you want to clarify that the 5-year review is different from the 5-year plan. I know previously, 5 years ago, there was some confusion about that. The 5-year review is a circular document that focuses on the productiveness of the remedies at the Hanford site. Whereas the 5-year plan is different altogether.
Yes, and that, those things were named that before any of us were here, we inherited them, but it is confusing. We have the TPA 5-year review that will be kicking off a little bit. We want to kick off the CERCLA 5-year review this November, as Roberto mentioned, and then we have the annual 5-year plan. So I'm gonna make a note of that, see as we move ahead, maybe we change the nomenclature on a couple of those things so we don't have so many 5-year things out there to be more helpful to people.
On the other hand, it's pretty decisive, 5 years.
Yeah.
Is it gonna be in similar format, giving us the risk reduction, all the 3 categories?
I haven't seen it, so I don't think it's gonna be a completely new product, but I honestly can't give you a straight answer on it.
Okay, yeah.
But I do think it will be similar to something that, a person can open up, read, something digestible. So there might be, again, with the new branding, some new branding and messaging, but I think we'll be still showing what projects we're gunning for in what year and based on funding.
Right.
So I don't expect it to be torn apart.
Yeah, it was a very, very helpful document, the way it started out and the way it's progressed over the years.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
All the input, is very helpful to us as we, try to massage that a little bit.
Well, and just to the point is that we can align some of our meetings and our advice with permission, our advice to your planned goals
Oh, yes.
to accomplish. So in other words, next year you got a goal to do something at tank farms. We'll ask the presentation this year or something, something on that order. It's a guide for us. So I think it's a really good document.
I want to give a shout out to all the agencies and to Carrie Meyer. I remember a few years ago, we were doing cleanup priorities and there was a need to get more information further in advance. And it was Carrie Meyer's big idea that we should bring this forth, get some feedback, have meetings and do that voluntarily. And I think it's worked really well for us. So we'll continue that as long as we possibly can. I have no intention of not doing that as best as we possibly can because it's a great tool for all of us. Helps keep me straight. So
Yeah.
I need that. So Ryan?
Amber also has a question.
Oh, sorry, Amber.
Oh, so I was just clarifying. So the idea is to do a community meeting workshop on the 5-year site plan in January. That's what you were, yeah. I mean, we haven't put it down in stone, but that would be your idea is that it would tie in with the board meeting.
Oh, yes, we always try to align I'm going to call it the placemat for lack of better words, but it's a thing that opens up and folds and it shows the projects we hope to work on for the next 5 years. We normally do that at the top of the fiscal year. I want to make sure the HAB members, the HAB membership packet is approved and the HAB members have travel paid. So we want to align it with your full HAB board meeting in January. So you can go to the board meeting on Wednesday, come here to the public meeting Wednesday night, and then carry on Thursday. So that's our grand design if everything is approved.
That sounds like a great idea. I like that. And maybe we can integrate some of these open house ideas that we're going to talk about later today, or ways to engage people at that meeting.
Yes.
So in terms of the CERCLA 5-year review, that's really looking at are the remedies and strategies to I guess, clean up groundwater or soil. What's the latest and whether or not cleanup standards should continue to be the same or change? Is that fair with the 5-year review?
I think that's a good description, but I'll yield to Roberto.
Yeah, Roberto, and are you thinking of having a community meeting on that, Roberto, and engaging with the tribes on that as well?
Yeah, so for the 5-year review, described it pretty accurately. It reviews the effectiveness of the remedies in place for soil and groundwater. And in the review itself, and you can look at the last 5-year review for reference. There are 3 questions that need to be answered at the end of the review. One of them being like, is the current cleanup standards still valid? Are there any changes in toxicity values, for example? And that gets answered for all the operable units at the Hanford site, not just one specific operable unit or geographic unit. And to the other question of community involvement, what we did, what we are trying to aim for this time around, and do we correct me if I'm wrong, we're trying to get more community involvement, like having community interviews during the review, and in other historical 5-year reviews, when they release a newspaper or press notice, there is a little disclaimer for the community, for any interested members of the community, that if they want to participate in the review, they can reach out to whoever's listed as a contact to partake in a community interview. And with the tribes, what we did last year, there were some informal technical discussions with the tribes, but there were not any offers of tribal consultations with the Circle 5-year reviews. Typically, that's not something that's done for the Circle 5-year review, since it's also not a decision document as well. And with the community meeting or public meeting, usually that's something that's facilitated by the lead federal agency or the potentially responsible party. And EPA will be happy to help DOE in this case support that and develop an effective public meeting.
So what's your goal for having that review completed? Like, what's the time frame? What's the time frame, and what's kind of your goal for having all that wrapped up, all the interviews and any kind of feedback?
I don't have any hard dates right now for when that review is actually going to start and stop. But we do want to have that. We are aiming to have that 5-year review signed and issued by May 4th of, I believe it's 2027.
Okay, are there any other questions for Roberto? Or anything else on the 5-year, all the 5 years, all the 5-year updates and reviews?
Since you made a comment regarding the 5-year plan, do you want to share that, or do you want me to read that off?
Josh, you can go ahead.
So, since they commented, regarding the annual 5-year plan, it is still in placement format with priorities listed in each of the 5 years. There may be some title and format changes along with color updates. The document is still in review and we will know more in the coming weeks, but overall it will be similar.
Great. And then there was someone posted with that in the past, Liz posted that in the past, the HAB has given advice on the CERCLA 5-year review. And I can't remember, Josh, if we have that in our to-do list for this next fiscal year. It wouldn't be this committee, but this committee could be involved in the outreach and engagement piece of it, but.
I don't think it's in our work plan, but it was something that was discussed during our workshop last month.
Right, okay.
correct me if I'm wrong, Roberto and Dana, but I think the idea was that there would be some, interviews during this review process with HAB members, right?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. Thanks for raising that. Yeah, there was an idea that Ryan mentioned to potentially use to have as another venue to get more community interviews as part of Circle 5-year review.
Or we could even have it as a roundtable item, maybe if we had time on one of our meetings in the next 6 to 8 months, right? Anyway, it could be individuals, but the HAB could also do like a round robin conversation and give you feedback as well. Just some thoughts.
Sure.
All right, welcome, Michelle. Glad you're here. She just joined. Michelle Holt, and I don't know if anyone else has joined since we started. But I think, are there any other updates then, Ryan, from ecology?
We do. Well, I'll kick it over to Dana.
Or Dana?
Let's let Dana finish up and then we can go.
I've been seeing you.
From Dana to Dana. Okay.
Yeah, we're a team.
Yeah,
Dana and I work together a lot.
Yes, we have a lot of fun together. Go ahead.
So, my updates aren't nearly as extensive as Dana's are. Ecology is a little quiet right now, so that's nice. Right now we have the air operating permit renewal 4 that's open until the 19th of this month. And this is just simply a full renewal of the air operating permit. So any changes that they've made within the last however many years since we did renewal 3 are all being input into renewal 4 to update it. And you know, that's just, there's all sorts of little changes, big changes. So all of those are implemented into the renewal 4. You can comment on that until the 19th. And then they'll do their magic and, you know, apply it or issue it. I don't know. I haven't heard what date he's aiming for to issue it, but Matt tends to like to get things done in a tidy way. So it's probably going to be somewhere close to the end of the year. And then the other one we have going is the high-level waste vitrification facility waste treatment plant permit modification, because they wanted to have the longest title ever. And that one is going to go on until October 13th. And it's a 45-day comment period. And it's talking about new configurations in the high-level waste facility, and working with how they can submit future permit submittals on engineering documents and information, and stuff like that. So, yeah. So you can go look at that. The documents for that are online. You can go to our website and see the documents there. And like I said, that one goes to the 13th. I don't have any other upcoming ones. Don't have any hard dates for any upcoming ones. Rev 9, we're still working on it. And as soon as I have dates, I'd be happy to share that with people. So, are there any questions?
Got a new question, Rob?
No, this is the talk with Dana and after she gets done.
Sorry, Daddy, you have some other stuff too.
Oh, no. Probably nice to break it up. So, yes, and special thanks to the leads. So I have a lot of fun working with the IOs, and we have a good working relationship. And I'm appreciative of all of you very much. So, as you may recall, that following the holistic agreement, there was a lot of interest and enthusiasm about moving the waste, some of the waste, to Utah and Texas. And then folks also were interested in the travel routes and if it would go in liquid form or grout form. So we held a 30-day feedback period on the NEPA supplement analysis, and many of you commented. So there's been a response summary prepared, a decision will go with that. And that is TBD, and being discussed for the end of the year. So know that there'll be a public notice with that coming out. That is, again, going to be, the timing on that will depend on who's in what chair at headquarters and when. And then, as you know, we've really had that, we're talking about applying TISCR, which is working well for us in the east area in the tanks, over into the west area. And that process, that public involvement process of working with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and holding out waste incidental to reprocessing comment period is still waiting to move forward at headquarters, and then we'll get that one happening as soon as we can. And then I done. For your patience.
Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the very first things you were saying.
Yes.
You remember?
Because I have notes, otherwise no.
So you were talking about some people working on holistic negotiation milestones, right?
Yes.
And okay, so first of all, the holistic negotiation, the 138 pages, it's big. Unreasonably big, I think, but in the revised tri-party agreement the table for the milestones have already been modified to the holistic agreement dates, or the titles and the subjects of the holistic agreement and discussed. We've already modified those milestones. So can you tell me you mentioned that we're going to be working on milestones for the holistic agreement. How are those milestones any different than the milestones in the tri-party agreement?
It's a great question, and I will.
I can clarify really quick, Rob. So Dana wasn't talking about the holistic agreement milestones. She was talking about there's been ongoing negotiations between the agencies. It's been called a couple different things, but it's for M15, M16, M85, which is like the soil and groundwater facilities milestone cleanup. So what Dana was saying was that I think we've been sharing at the last several HAB meetings that those negotiations have been ongoing and the agencies. I'm not the technical expert on all of this, but there was some kind of agreement principle a while ago that we're basically trying to wrap that up by the mid-fall timeframe. So Dana was saying that we're starting to look at public involvement for that when that wraps up. So that's I think Dan was tying the holistics to say the holistics wrapped up and the agency's looking to finalize this other thing.
Correct. Thank you for it.
Yeah.
Can you touch on the subject just a little bit? In particular, any particularities? How's that?
So again, it might be good if you hang around for the car meeting this afternoon, you might be able to ask Jason Capron about it. And we also have some other EPA and DU ecology staff in the room for that conversation when we talk about just non-tank cleanup stuff. But my understanding is those negotiations are basically the three big milestones for the non-tank stuff at the site. So like soil, groundwater, the facility kind of remediation, and I'm not sure if Roberto was accurate, but I missed one. CERCLET, thank you, sir. So yeah, non-tank cleanup, but essentially is the short answer. But yeah, there'll be more correct people in the room that can talk to it this afternoon. That's more well-versed on it than Ryan. So.
Okay.
For me.
Any other questions on our upcoming events?
About committee business. Are we in committee business?
That is our next item on our agenda adjustments. So Roberto, do you want to talk about the stuff you were sharing in chat?
Oh, yeah. So I mentioned this earlier. There are two fact sheets that I added in the chat that explain more of the Superfund, and one of them is sorry, not Superfund, 5-year reviews in Superfund, and one of them is a fact sheet involving regarding involving the community in the Circle 5-year review process, and the other fact sheet is a more holistic overview of the Circle 5-year review as a whole. That was it.
Perfect. Make sure we get those in the minutes. Any other upcoming events to discuss from the agencies?
Oh, we have a Let's Talk About Hanford next week. It's not strictly public involvement, like a comment period, but our live stream next week's gonna talk about Hispanic kind of heritage and history with the Manhattan Project and the Hanford site. Having a guest speaker from WC Tri-Cities, a PhD student who hosted an exhibit at the Reach Museum last year. So he's gonna basically kind of share that topic for our live stream next week. So that's 5:30 next Thursday.
Great. Will that be, I noticed that you guys have created a new outreach email list, Ryan, or I got an email saying, maybe you were talking about that to HAB members. I couldn't remember, but I appreciate getting an update and then being told you don't have to sign up for another list. If you're on this list, you'll be on that list. Am I right?
Yeah, I completely spaced on that. It's been a busy week. Yeah, so last week we started a new quarterly newsletter that Ben is leading on. So we issued our first newsletter last week, and to kind of coincide with that new newsletter, we started a new Gov delivery distribution list for basically all of our nuclear waste program newsletters that Ben will do, our news releases and our blogs. And I sent an email to HAB members last week as part of the distribution that shared that new link. Part of the intention there was we have the Hanford information distribution list, but I think really the big intent for that list is supposed to focus mostly on like public involvement through like comment periods and like public hearings and meetings. So this new list kind of aligns with like what DOE is doing, where DOE has its own dedicated distribution list for their newsletters. And their news releases. So we're kind of aligning with that. So we're doing our own distribution list for news releases, blogs, newsletters, and I think Josh will start including that on the weekly happenings. So there's multiple opportunities to see it and subscribe to it. But thanks for reminding me about that, Amber.
I thought it looked great. So thank you. Nice job. Trying to consolidate, right? And make sure everybody's getting got all the information. I had a question then about in the leadership meeting that we had, we discussed whether the HAB information can be going out to more than just HAB members. Have we had any follow-up on that in terms of engagement and getting information out?
No, not yet, Amber, and honestly, I don't know that we're gonna get an answer in the next couple weeks, at least. Just with everything else that's going on right now.
Okay, lots of transitions happening, yes. So anyway, it's just the more that information can get out about what the HAB is doing, we are an advisory board that I think most of our activities are open to the public and should be known. So the more we can get out information and allow others from our organizations who don't happen to be a HAB member, get information, it's sure helpful instead of me forwarding things to other people. So anyway, that's just a reminder on that. But anything else on communications, engagement, updates? We can move to the committee business.
Yes, Amber. Yesterday, during the twist meeting, I went through with Megan a little bit of the planning for this next year. And they'd like the tank waste committee to work with the co-committee and come up with some ideas to support the holistic agreement. And in the area of enlisting community support for the holistic agreement. So I know Chris and I talked a little bit. He'd love to tie this whole thing in with the budget advice that he would like to offer. So I think there's a lot of good ideas going on here, but we need to decide how to work together on this. I think one of the first things is that the holistic agreement does what its name says. It's a whole big foggy thing that nobody can really see through because it's holistic. I can ask everybody in this room, what's the holistic agreement to you? Okay, is it new milestones? No, it's an agreement to set new milestones to avoid getting sued. But who knows this whole thing? Very few of us really understand what the holistic agreement means to us as the public. So I don't know how to really, I can suggest a couple things, maybe a roundtable at the next board meeting, where we go around and we get people to make some comments on what they feel about it. But again, stepping into a room cold, expecting to be able to make a meaningful comment is kind of hard to do. So surprising people. So do we need an education? Do we need to revive that presentation that we had about a year ago on the holistic agreement and better understand it? And then go forward and figure out some way of getting community support for it?
Josh, can you put up the twist work plan action advice request?
So just,
That way Amber knows what Rob is talking
yeah, I
about.
have it on my screen. I'm ready to share. Just do want to make sure. It seems to me like the lines between subcommittee business and the TPA public involvement are starting to blur. Do we have anything more on?
Yeah, I mean, if we're ready to move on to the subcommittee business, that's fine, unless there's any other outstanding things with the TPA public involvement activities. Oh, hearing none, seeing none, then this seems like appropriate for our subcommittee business. Our business plan for what we're doing and how we can help our fellow committees with their work as well.
Oh, thank you, Dana, for very Brian, for caring. Sound like we're moving on to our next agenda.
Thank you all. Okay, so just before we get going though, Rob, Josh, did you have some other, just so we stay on track, did you have some other subcommittee business items too that you had, that you kind of had put aside as well?
You know, it's pretty related. So I was gonna talk about how the COE's advice kind of flows out through the year and concepts for our next meeting. So if we're looking at adding another one, that is entirely relevant.
Okay, well then, Rob, why don't you, oh, here you go. Here's the tank waste topic, huh? And I noticed that Liz, just for those who are in the meeting, Liz posted something in the chat that Hanford Challenge has stuff on their webpage about the holistic settle agreement. So thanks, Liz. All right, so what, provide policy level advice on outreach strategies, messaging, and opportunities to reinforce trust and transparency in the tank waste mission and build community support following the holistic agreement. All right, Rob, do you want to talk about the discussion you had then in tanks?
Well, I have this, if you could present this one to her. You have that one with our each quarter?
I do have that, and then
Okay.
I have a COE specific one as well.
Okay, can we show the tank waste?
Okay, so we're going to navigate to that one because I was not ready for it. Okay. Okay. So this is a look ahead I created for each of the subcommittees that are meeting this week, where I outlined, what we talked about in last month's workshop and how, what each committee was asking for across each quarter and that, their related meeting actions. So for Twist, who will likely be sharing the day of November 5th with the COE, is looking to begin work on this advice item we just showed.
So we've been requested to offer advice jointly from both of our committees on how to get community support for the holistic agreement. They have targeted us to have an IM team in by January, or actually October coming up, get an IM team. Then in January, actually have the draft of the advice. And then we'll probably pass it in April.
I love the
So-
idea of maybe even overlapping our committee meetings that day, you know, so we can we could work on it together. That's great. Because you guys are more, I mean, you guys will have your more technical knowledge, and then we could have our co-members, you know, we can have a joint, maybe like if you guys had, if we had our meeting in the morning, then we could have the tank waste meeting for the middle of the day, and then you guys could do the rest of your meeting. Anyway, that seems like a good way to work it out. So when we say community support, this, can the TPA agencies kind of talk about what they're seeking then for that? Like, is that like engaging the community around the new holistic agreement and what it means and why it's important?
Sure, Megan, you want to go first, Mike?
I would say yes, like exactly what you just said is what we're looking for. So not too down in the weeds of what holistic is. It's more of, like you said, like how can we get this to more community members and help them understand what it's all about.
Specifically the
Yeah, I
tank
don't-
waste mission.
I don't have much to add, but I wanted to offer this anecdote, Amber, that I offered at the Twist meeting yesterday, that I think it's also intentionally, like I said, we tried to provide some information on what we're looking for, but also wanted to leave it a little bit, I want to say vague, but a little bit open, so the HAB can kind of pursue what they want to pursue for the advice on how they want to advise the agencies. And one example I thought of is I know there's been a lot of energy and concerns around the WARM project, part of the holistic agreement, and the decisions and path forward associated with that. And so maybe part of the HAB's advice, if it's something they're interested in, could talk about, hey, you know, if energy is going to be transporting waste, here's our thoughts on how they should engage, you know, on how the agency should engage the communities along the routes. So that it's stuff like that. That's just one example, but there's a bunch of different components to the agreement. There's like the WARM, the grouting kind of mission, the vitrification side of it, you know, tank retrievals. So I think it can really be what the HAB wants it to be for what you want to advise the agencies on, where we should be messaging the community and like Megan said, you know, ways we can message the community, build, you know, transparency and that kind of stuff. If that's helpful.
So is there so basically you'd be seeking advice on how to do that, how to message the different strategies for protecting groundwater from the tank waste, right? Like different strategies to immobilize the tank waste, why that's important. You know, are you looking to describe the new pieces of the holistic agreement or anything that's new or different? Or is it more a broad engagement and building awareness of the tank waste mission? Because I know you guys are also trying to educate the community about the new. Yeah, go ahead, Susan.
This is the line drawn of the start of the new day is the holistic agreement. So we're not writing about the holistic agreement, we're writing about how to do work, how to message work in the future, starting from like that day. So this is not necessarily about the holistic agreement, it's about how does tank waste mission get communicated. Am I on track, Brian and Megan?
Yeah.
So it's kind of ignore the holistic agreement words.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah. Okay, well, I think this would be a great project for our November. We do like a joint session with the two committees and really tell folks we need their feedback and come prepared. Would it be possible to give us ahead of the meeting, you know, some of the the strategies and concepts you want us to discuss, or how to take maybe more complex technical cleanup strategies and explain them, or, you know, it might be good for you guys to prep us for that meeting with some documents or some ideas. I'm talking about the TPA agencies. But I think I'm all in. Are there other comments or suggestions from other committee members? Anyway, go ahead.
No, I think you're on track. And we can talk offline. I think where we don't want to be overstepping too much is that we have some of that broader knowledge, so we kind of want your perspectives on it. So that we have like the public side of it. Like you guys even know more than the public does in theory, right? So how can we make this make sense for everyone and have people care about it?
Well, you know, one thing though, is if I go around anybody in our area, what's the holistic agreement? Nobody's gonna know. I mean, it's just not a thing that people would pick up and know.
That's what we want your help on.
But,
That's what the advice is.
yeah, okay, I understand. It's
Yeah.
not very exciting. And trying to make it exciting can be kind of difficult because,
Yeah.
essentially technology has changed since we started this process, and the holistic agreement integrates some of that brand new technologies in there. And so that's a bright future for us. And I can, see us concentrating on where we're doing and how we're trying to drive success.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there's so many conflicting things within the holistic agreement that it's really hard to promise anything.
Right.
And we know too that budgets are gonna change and the whole plan can be blown out of the water or totally supported. One and the other. It's extreme. We looked at the budget, Chris and I, and one of the things that he pointed out is that in the outer years, close to 70% of the budget is just gonna go to the vitrification. So there's not gonna be any money for anything else. So things are gonna change with time.
They are, but I think that's where we need to keep it maybe even higher level than that. And like you said, you could go to anyone in the community and ask them what it is and they wouldn't know. That's where we need your help. That's where we need your ideas. And the advice doesn't need to be one very specific thing. You guys could put 4 or 5 ideas in there about maybe this would be a great way to engage the community. So try and mix.
Now you're changing now we're mixing with the community, or we're coming up with ideas for DOE to mix with the community.
That's what, yeah,
Okay,
that's what we're asking for.
all right.
So
Yeah.
Liz has a comment on this sort of definition subject. Want to share that?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was just saying it, and maybe you want to say holistic agreement, but I think that is probably the barrier. Instead, you could just say, what are your thoughts on the tank waste cleanup path forward? And people would understand the words you're saying, and have thoughts on it, and then you can ask about the holistic agreement. But I think starting with holistic agreement, which is why I shared our webpage, because we tried to make a whole page untangling what it is and what it means, but just putting that out there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's probably one of the first pieces of advice is like, talk about what it is. And then, because really you're talking about what is the plan for tank waste cleanup? The holistic agreement is an agreement about how that's going to happen. But that if you're really trying to reach people, I agree, Liz, you start with the basics. So, and work from there. But yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a great topic for a joint conversation in November. Any other thoughts on this topic?
Quick clarification, going back to your earlier question of, what do the subcommittees need to know to write it? Twist is looking to bring this advice, at least for the workshop, to the April HAD meeting. Meaning they would be looking at it in their February subcommittee meeting, which gets you November to figure out what discussion you need in order to begin drafting that. So if you know what you need, this would be a great time to request that, or what you'd like to hear to.
Yeah, yeah. This would be. I would take notes down if people want to suggest things that you want to see in there.
On a very similar note. So I showed the tanks version. I also took the workshop content for COE and laid those out across the year. They had several pieces of advice looking to January. You know, the partner and community outreach on open house events, which we'll be talking about today. And then the second half of that, broadening public awareness of the Hanford site. Enhancing public messaging was initially identified as an ESC topic, but it sounds to me like it's being rolled into this. So we'll be going on a space to discuss this advice in some form. And initially you had the HELAC community engagement plan identified as the February topic. However, I've gotten a sneak peek at our slides from later, and it seems that is going to be requested for January. So we want to consider that as well. And those are standing items, and then the requested items, which is the cleanup priorities draft advice, which where Ed and Chris would like to get input from each of the subcommittees. So how that lays out, conceptually at least, for our November meeting would be COE opening, or public involvement activities, and jumping into a draft advice workspace, whatever that may look like for you. Take a break. Another draft advice workspace for the HELACs, our business, lunch, and then a joint session with the COE and Twist on a cleanup priorities advice, and potentially continuing that joint session to accommodate this new tank waste mission joint effort, which I didn't plan that far ahead because that's information. But that would fill out the whole day. So my question to you,
So you're saying it would fill out the whole day between the two committees?
yeah, so in November, I was looking to kind of cross committees over in both days to accommodate this cleanup priorities advice, but this could just continue on with the joint Twist meeting into the afternoon to discuss the tank waste mission outreach strategies.
So where is the joint conversation then? Or you haven't put it on there yet?
Yeah, this was new information to me as of 10 minutes ago, so I didn't plan this part.
Come on, Josh, keep up.
Oh,
Just giving you a hard time. Just giving you a hard time. But I would do it. Yeah, I would do it if we could. You know, right after lunch or before lunch. So then if well, anyway, we'll have to talk with tank waste folks, see what works best, but I would want it to be at the end of the like so it could be crossover somehow.
Yeah,
but anyway.
That was the goal, since we'd want to get cleanup priorities advice input. I had already placed that there in the middle of the day between the two committees. So we could just continue this as COE starts in the morning, Twist joins in after lunch. Then we continue with those.
Right. And then if co-members wanted to leave, or if they wanted to stay for the cleanup priorities advice, they could.
Exactly.
Perfect. That's a lot. We got a busy November.
So I think our next presenters have arrived. So my task to you leading up to the end of this meeting is to consider what information you're going to need or where we may possibly be on these advice pieces in order to help plan out this conceptual agenda a little further. The deadline for this agenda will be September 30th. So you have about 2 weeks to figure it out.
Okay. With the tank waste cleanup, you know, community awareness and education. I mean, to me, I would love just to see some of the recent ecology or DOE publications, you know, just to review and see how it's been described, like in terms, you know, the different strategies from, you know, vitrification to, you know, the immobilization or shipments or all the different strategies that are happening. It'd be good to have like recent public notices and information just to review as we're, you know, I know we want to have a kind of a clean slate and get information from board members. And I'm not wanting to wordsmith anything. I just think for me, that would be helpful to see how it's been described so far in ecology and DOE publications so that we can kind of get a sense of how we might want to see that different. So that would just be one thing to add there, Josh.
And I'll note that in.
They have some pretty extensive fact sheets already published.
Yeah, we
Right.
can,
So if you could just like, even in an email, just put a bunch of links to those to both committees that we can review prior to that meeting, you know, just to refresh.
yeah, I'll coordinate with DOE and EPA. We can definitely get together a list of things that we can share with the two committees.
Sounds good. I was just going to point out that on this public involvement webpage, under other, we have the holistic agreement materials with some of the things that went out in the public notices and press releases were very helpful. And so this page is a good one-stop shop for all of that, plus the events calendar. Glad to help you do those things up though.
That's great. All right, are we ready to move to, unless there's if we have time at the end of the agenda, Josh, maybe people are thinking through other materials we might need, but I know we're going to get to the open house event partnering discussion, and so we might need some materials for that too after we discuss.
Yeah.
So, should we move to that topic? Is everybody here?
I believe so. We have a couple new guests. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
My name is Heather Gale. I'm the assistant manager for River and Plateau at the Department of Energy. It's a long title, but essentially what that means is that I am responsible for all of the cleanup outside of the tank waste and high level waste programs. So all the soil and groundwater remediation, all of the facility remediation and the transuranic waste programs. You guys want to join us? I mean, you can say there, but Heather's welcome to join us.
Hello, everybody. Scott Green. Slightly longer title because I'm the deputy assistant manager for River and Plateau, and I'm Heather's deputy.
And you're the alternate DDF.
I'm also the alternate DDFL. Yes. Thank you.
So Amber, I don't know, is that obvious? Okay. We had come up with some questions to kind of help lead this discussion a little bit. We will email them to Josh. We will email them to Josh so that you guys can see them online. There's all kinds of stuff on here. So I kind of figured the next hour, there's really no plan. It's just to kind of talk about, I don't know, Heather, if you have just like that high level idea of what we're maybe thinking that would be helpful, and then we can let them talk and then talk about what we need from them and how they can help.
Yeah, so essentially, I'd like to improve or change how we communicate with the public. So that's where I'd like some input, because I feel like sometimes we're doing a lot of talking to the public and we talk about the things we're going to do, but I'm not sure that we're really great with when we talk about the good things that have happened, or even when we talk about the things that we're doing, if we're communicating those things in an effective way. So that was part of what I was hoping to get, is how can we improve the engagement? And then we've also had some different ideas of how we can engage with the public based off of things that have been happening at like Los Alamos, when Los Alamos has a public meeting, sometimes what they'll do is they'll have different tables set up so that members of the public, if they're interested in groundwater, for example, they can go to the groundwater table and talk to those folks. So I'm curious, I'm just interested in your feedback in terms of communication, what would be good or how we can improve if there's information that you're not getting, and then how the engagement piece too, how can we engage in a different way? Or if there would be a more effective way of engaging.
I don't know what you guys think. I don't know if some of you want to just talk about, I know there's more people online today than there are in here. But if people have ideas on what's working and what's not working, Amber, what do you think?
Well, I was thinking maybe start with the positive. I know there's been some good examples of engagement over the last 2 or 3 years. Once we got out of the pandemic and we were able to do community meetings and gatherings in person, I know I have some thoughts. I thought maybe we could start with the positive. So what are some examples of effective engagement in person or online? Maybe we could get feedback from the members of the committee. You know, specific examples and why you thought that was particularly effective.
The Hanford dialogue that was 2 Decembers ago in the evening, was everybody that went found it really informative, and it was great because they were able to actually talk to representatives from the particular areas. There were some downsides just in the room layout, because you had a lot of people and there was, not as much, there was a lot of background noise. But overall, having the site management there and being able to talk to particular areas kind of one-on-one, was very well received.
Susan, was that the one that was at the Red Lion?
Yep. That was
Okay.
December 2 years ago.
I want to echo that. I thought that was really well done because you had 4 different areas. I think there was 4 breakouts. There was an overall welcome with kind of just so you got to know some of the site leaders and who they are, and so that you could talk to them during the meeting and knew who they were, and kind of an overview of what to expect from the hour and a half, after the welcome. And then I liked being able to break out into each of the areas. So there was like a tank waste, there was a groundwater, there was other site remediation, soils and buildings. And then I can't remember. I don't know if there was 3 or 4 breakouts, Susan, but it was great because I got to, if you wanted to, you could just go to 2 and then go to the boards and look at other things and talk to other people. You didn't have to go to all the breakouts if you didn't want to, but if you wanted to, you could, and you could really get basically it was a 5 or 10 minute overview of what's been going on and what the plans are for the next couple years. And then Q&A in probably groups of 15 to 20 people, right after they broke out. But yeah, there was it was all in the same room. So it was a little loud and busy, and people were having side conversations by the big boards, information boards. So probably having a facility where you could have breakout rooms where people could hear better would be good. But I thought that was excellent for, and you could do that just on one topic or dig into tank waste, but multiple strategies of how you're doing, dealing with tank waste. You could do it with one area of the site and have breakouts, or you could talk about the whole site and all the different activities and have breakouts. But I liked that model because I could kind of pick and choose how long I wanted to go to things or if I didn't want to go to something. And I think giving people choices, because we have people who know a lot about Hanford cleanup and we have people who know very little. And so it's important to stagger the information in a way for people at different levels of knowledge, I guess.
I think in that particular open house that we had, the very beginning half hour, so Brian Vance was just an outstanding speaker. He just basically knew everything and could answer every question. And that was the key to that meeting there. And then people stuck around and went to the other side things. So, and it was about a half hour, if I recall. You know.
I mean, I think it was, yeah, I think you're right, Rob, like 2 hours total. The first half an hour was Brian giving a presentation, answering questions, and then there was the breakouts for the next hour and a half or so.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's a sign up at that front desk where you can get for more newsletters and other information. That was real. A lot of names on those lists.
And it was kind of a first step back to the old days when we did the state of the site.
Yeah.
Sessions. And it's just like, it was like once a year or so. And in the old days, it even moved around the region. So it wasn't just here.
Oh, okay.
But they took Dana will know much better than I do, about how it moved to the Portland region and the Seattle area. And it was just kind of, it's more of a roadshow.
Okay.
To help educate people on the site. I think as being an old timer, the one-on-one is great. The challenge is also, I'm going to dovetail into a different topic, kind of adjacent, is the multi-generational. How do you engage the youngsters? How do you educate them on what's going on? So, it's kind of, and that is a challenge I think we all face. But yeah, I really love the one-on-one. But yeah, I don't know how we're gonna kind of get to the TikTok generation.
Yeah.
That's some of the, when Doug Riggs and I did a lot of high school classrooms. And I found that a lot of the high school students, seniors and juniors, were more interested in jobs. Great jobs out here, long jobs. You can become a professional. There's a lot of opportunity at the site here. And that got some of them excited. Possibilities.
So we could partner with the local schools and maybe, because I think they still have career days where maybe some of us come out and talk about the careers at Hanford, and because they're in that space there, you could have lots of difference. It's not just trades, there's all sorts of, and then get them excited that way. I like that.
Yeah.
I'd also like to engage Liz Matson, who's over in the Portland region. She's over on the west side, and Amber, who's up in Spokane, because they have very different challenges than we do here in the Tri-Cities. And what's worked, what hasn't worked for their region.
Because there is no one size fits all.
There is not in the Pacific Northwest, there definitely isn't.
And something that I think, Liz, I'll let Liz chime in here, but something, I just think post-pandemic, to Susan's point, there haven't been those community meetings around the region, or very few. And so a lot of people have moved to our region. They've moved to Seattle, to Spokane, to Portland, to the Tri-Cities. And we have a whole, I can tell you, we've had so many people move to Spokane in the last 7 years. And I know this because I'm an elected official who went doorbelling and would ask people, well, how long have you lived here? And I was so surprised when I was running for office 3 years ago, how many people had said that they had only lived here for 5 to 7 years or less. And so there's a lot of lack of understanding or knowledge about Hanford. I mean, there's just a lot of new growth to Washington and Oregon. And so I think we need to think about getting back to basics. And that's why you could shape, right, an open house or a workshop around kind of the knowledge level of different areas. And you could shape it a little bit different, but I don't think it would take a lot more resources. But I think that's one of the things that we could put in a piece of advice is, know your audience. And I mean, there's also, you know, a huge Spanish speaking population in Central Washington. And I know there's been different efforts to engage, you know, first and second generation Latinos who are many working at the site and lived in the Tri-Cities for many years. And how do you engage your audience? Know your audience, right? When you create your materials and you come up with the shape of either online or anyway, we're kind of talking about in person. Maybe there's other Liz, did you want to weigh in on like the in-person side of meetings? And then I do think we could talk a little bit about the opportunity for virtual meetings that are more engaging and more interesting too. But Liz, did you want to weigh in on strategies for having effective in-person engagement?
Yeah, thanks. And it's great to be talking about this again. I did drop in the chat just so people have it because it's old. The 2018, the PIC, which was what the COE used to be called, we made a suggestion we wrote up this whole template for regional dialogue meetings that the agencies did implement. But it's really, the agencies asked for it. So that might be helpful to look at because it's pretty comprehensive. I think the one thing I would say is you can't do everything in these meetings. You have to pick one thing to do well. And the thing that the agencies, if the TPA agencies are hosting these meetings, the thing that you have that no other groups that are doing outreach on Hanford have are access to decision makers and people who are actually taking input from the public and turning it into on the boots on the ground cleanup. And that relationship between the public and decision makers is important and has a lot, you know, changes over time. It all depends on who's in charge. But when it used to be state of the site meetings, leaders who had the right attitude and could be present and listen to input, it created a really powerful space for people to be heard. So I appreciate that you were saying about, like, you know, the template where there's like, we're going to give you a long presentation doesn't usually work because one, you don't know if people know the information. It's hard to really communicate effectively with a huge group unless you're on a really specific topic. If you're doing all of Hanford cleanup, that's a lot to cover in a short time, but you can get really helpful feedback from people, especially if they're regional in-person meetings. And I saw that happen as someone in the room. And topics also, I'm pretty sure this is in the suggestions, having topics that reflect the interest of the community you're going to is also really helpful when you can tailor the information. And I know there's issues with getting headquarters approval for presentations, but sometimes you just need the person in the room who can answer on the fly in a way that's clear and easy for people to understand. And that can make all the difference too. Also, it's just building trust and relationships with people. And then online, I think that's like a whole nother ball game of like what that looks like to have effective two-way communication. It's a lot harder, but for the in-person, I guess I'll stop there. Thanks.
So something that was passed out in the room was a list of questions that might prompt ideas, either for this discussion or for your future advice. So I'm gonna share those. Yeah, is there anything on here that sparks any particular ideas?
I think this, can I follow up on Liz? I think made a good point that you really need to have a goal for the meeting. What is it? Is it, you know, making sure you're clear on what you're trying to gather from people. If it's just too generic, then people don't see the value. Like, well, you know, so it is good to tailor a community meeting around a particular topic or a goal. And then also make sure the materials, like she was saying, are appropriate. And so like in Spokane, you know, I mean, the hot topic is the waste shipments. And what does that mean? And what kind of, you know, risks are there, large or small? And, but, you know, it would have been nice to have conversations about that when we had the HAB meeting in Spokane. So it's like thinking about what's important to the community that you're going to. But anyway, I think that, to Liz's point as well, the number of people isn't necessarily, like, if you get a group of 30 people in a room for a workshop and it's really engaging around tank waste, that is a win. Like, I think sometimes we think, oh, we only got 30 people, but it was 30 people in Spokane who are now educated and are going to go out and share the information with others. Or maybe it's 100 people in the Tri-Cities, and that's like success. But small group or having the opportunity for one-on-one, like Susan was talking about, is really valuable. So I think on that third bullet, how do we balance content delivery with open Q&A time? I think you really have to balance it. I've been to a lot of meetings in the past on Hanford where you're just talked at for like 45 minutes and then they take open testimony, but it's not really Q&A. And I think that's the worst model. So anyway, I'll shush up. These are great questions. Anyone else want to weigh in?
Yeah, Jerry had some thoughts.
Thank you. I was not surprisingly going to the same place as Amber here, but in order to have a meeting, whether it's an online forum, workshop, or an in-person one that's effective, really means going back to the public involvement plan and prior work done on state of site meetings, saying we would have a concerted dialogue before the meeting about what is important in each community. Because otherwise, if you just choose 4 topics that the people sitting around here or at a TPA meeting, at the program manager meeting, aren't going to hit the topics that the community groups know is important for their community. And secondly, if they're not feeling like you're hitting those topics, we're not going to do turnout, whether it's, so, yeah, it's a two-way street. And the other piece of that is that the public involvement plan refers to having alternative public viewpoints presented at meetings. And while the forum 2 years ago in December was structured nicely, just want to point out, DOE called security to stop us from having an information table. And that doesn't make it feel like anyone in their right mind would again want to have a information table and do turnout for a meeting. When we're the largest membership-based group in the region, trying to provide information to people, and it's in the public involvement plan. It's part of the state's public participation grant program. And saying we don't want to hear from citizen groups is not the way to make sure that you're going to have meaningful forums.
I was not present for the meeting you're referring to, but what I will say is that Hanford in general is going through a lot of change right now. And Megan has been working hard to open up the dialogue both directions. And we're looking to support exactly what you're talking about, to be able to hear what the concerns are, respond to said concerns, and not just speak to you, that actually engage and have these conversations.
That's very exciting. Very exciting.
Is it all right if we move to, I don't want to, if there's, people can throw out any ideas here, but I think something that's evolved since the pandemic is the virtual meeting, the virtual open house, having like a lunchtime brown bag virtual session, maybe on a topic. And I know Heart of America Northwest, we've been using those to engage people throughout the region on different Hanford topics. And we get a good turnout at those because people are, you know, all over and they can't always make an in-person meeting. So I was wondering if maybe we could generate just a few, if that's something we think we want to give advice to the agencies, or maybe do the TP agencies want to hear from us on how to use online virtual open houses or meetings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because Jerry, we've been doing that with Heart of America. Maybe you have a couple comments and then we can go around if others have participated in them, or if there's been any TPA agency virtual meetings that people have participated in that they might have some feedback.
Yeah, right.
Well, we've had great success in doing, let me just say, offering workshops where we offer the workshop at lunch hour and in early evening. It's a different audience and gets a lot of appreciation. We've had workshops on topics like the holistic agreement with, in one day, getting 70-something people between 2 workshops, which is quite a lot. I think that's a big takeaway, having a range of perspectives shared during those workshops. It's important. And plenty of time for Q&A, some official workshop, having allowing people to actually offer comments, I think is really important, because telling people to come back again later or saying we did a public meeting like we do on the budget, and now you have to go do something different and read it before, is we keep hearing that that's frustrating to people. So having a summary record that says one of the participants asked about and commented in support of ensuring that there were funds for the capital budget for beautification plan construction. It's, I think, important, instead of saying, oh, now you got to go back later. And remember, there's a comment period 60 days from now. That would be our input.
Liz has another idea on the virtual engagement aspect.
Oh yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, sorry. I stuck it in the chat. There is this really cool platform called GatherTown that might be fun to check out. I went to like a STEM science fair. I was like, how is this going to work? And it was really cool. You have like a little avatar that walks around and you go visit different rooms where the presenter is hanging out, and they time sessions, and then you spend however much time in that room, and then you go talk to someone else, and you can talk as if you're on Zoom like this, or on a, actually interact, or just listen. But it was surprisingly, I was skeptical, and it was really cool.
Yeah, sometimes Zoom, you can do those breakout rooms in Zoom, but it's not always easy, and you have to have someone massaging all of that in the background. And so that GatherTown sounds really interesting. Has anyone do the TPA agencies have you guys been doing some virtual meetings and do you have much participation right now?
I can speak to that a little bit. I think the biggest one that we've been doing outside of, public meetings and stuff, was the Let's Talk About Hanford series. We started 2-3 years ago. We do those ones on different topics, and I think we've seen our attendance go up and down on some of the events, and some of it's dependent on like advertising, I think, and timing and topic. But I think in general we've had some pretty good discussions, and we host them. We do dual stream, so we host it in Zoom, but we live stream it to Facebook, so folks can either ask their comments on the Facebook stream or in the Zoom chat. And what we've been trying to do the last couple times is open up the mic. That way folks can actually unmute and turn on their cameras and engage that way. But we've still been finding folks just prefer to put their questions in the chat. But we like to have the option there. But I think we've been having pretty good success with those events overall. And we're looking to keep doing them as long as there's interest. But the one thing we've been interested in has been timing and stuff, because I think we've shifted between holding them at like 5:30 or 6, and I know we've been exploring maybe doing events like over lunch hour, like Jerry and others were saying. So I think that's the biggest example. Ecology has the virtual ones. I'm not sure if DU or UK's got anything they wanted to share. But.
All right, say something.
Yeah.
In different communities, the culture of evening meetings is very different. And Richland is a community where people tend to go to meetings early, like 5:30. In Seattle or Portland, that's not usually part of the culture. It's more like holding a meeting at 6 or 7, or even 7:30 for community meetings. And that makes it tough if you're doing just one virtual meeting for the whole region. But it's something to pay attention to, because the Tri-Cities has a very different culture. I talk to local officials all the time, always, and it's not just Hanford events that are 5:30. But in Seattle and Portland, we wouldn't think about doing a public meeting at 5:30. That's just something to bear in mind and try to, you can't please all people all the time if you do just one, but you might want to vary it. And, it's tough that you don't want to answer.
Well, you also have different travel challenges.
Right, that's part of why doing a meeting at 5:30 in Seattle is
challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that Spokane and the Tri-Cities have less traffic, so we tend to get to work earlier and leave earlier. Yes.
I think it's more of a city mouse versus country mouse.
But we're starting, and I'll give feedback that I'll have more information in the next month, but we're doing our growth plan update for Spokane County. And we're experimenting with lunchtime workshops on different chapters of our growth plan for Spokane County. So like climate change chapter, affordable housing. And we're experimenting with the lunchtime, because yes, not for young people or students who might be in school, but for adults, whether you're at home, working from home, working in an office, a lunchtime can be, if you're, a time when you can jump on your phone and join a virtual meeting. But yeah, it's not perfect for everyone, but I think the idea is having multiple dates and times, and then people can make a choice. Again, what works best for me? But when you only have one, so maybe even combining it, like an in-person meeting, workshop, and then having an online, at a different time, so people can make choices of what works best for them.
Anna has some comments.
This is Ana Grisel. I just had one comment, and it was kind of piggybacking on what Amber just said. Our world nowadays offers so many options that, even talking specifically about, let's talk about Hanford, right? Even if you can't make it at 5:30 or 6, then you can go back and watch the recording, right? And I think that's also the case for other meetings that are recorded. So we understand traffic, we understand live, right? But there's always that option of going back to a recording, and the hybrid opportunities as well, just like you said, maybe there's offerings of something in person and an online, combined, or just depending on what the topic is or what the area of you know of people we're trying to target, we can do. But yeah, I mean, we have the options, and we also have the ability to do hybrid sometimes, and that is a benefit that we didn't necessarily have 4 or 5 years ago. So anyway, just offering that. Thank you.
And of course, the downside of hybrid is when the technology doesn't want to cooperate.
Right.
Mind if it's, that happens every time too.
Are you talking about a particular meeting, Susan?
I don't think I need
Yeah.
to be specific in any one meeting at this time.
But I think,
since
yeah.
it's happened on a few occasions in the last year. Technology is wonderful, except when it doesn't want to work, and then
There's also something that, we need to remember, is not everybody has, like, I'll get documents and I can't open them. Because they're in a format of Adobe that won't let me have them read it out loud to me or do any of the things. And so I think that, I really wish that we stick with the Word format if we can, and make it so that we can they dumb it down to the, lowest level of users. Everybody's got Word, so, but anyway, I've had problems opening documents, and information. And, yeah. Yeah, the holistic agreement is one of them. It's not very easy to go through. And I like to start out a paragraph or go to a section, start out, and then just put it on and read it out loud to me so I can sit back and digest it. If it, that's the only way to come for a 138 page document. So anyway, I think that we also need to understand that. And a lot of these newer technologies here, you're ruling out, anybody 60 and up. From these parts of that conversation, because it's just not inherent to us to carry our phone around with us all the time. And yeah, it's just not there.
but I want to also recognize in the positive category, this board, out of all of the 8 boards, is the one board that has fully embraced hybrid. And it has made us much more effective. I doubt we will ever see 38 peak bodies around the physical table ever again. But because we've embraced hybrid, we've made it possible for all of our constituencies to participate, which is unique to us because there are other boards that have not embraced hybrid fully. They either have it online YouTube screening but you still have to be in the room to talk or provide a comment or jump to hybrid at all. So I have to recognize that as a positive for this site, that because we have fully embraced it for all of our constituencies in the Pacific Northwest, it has been definitely a positive. And I'm an old school, I'd rather see everybody in person, but it allows multi-generational engagement as well as everything from the retired person that has all the time in the world to the person that has a full-time day job and an active family life to still be engaged and knowing what's going on. So don't change that aspect.
I know for us out at the Hanford site, pre-COVID, every meeting was in person, right? And now that we have Teams, you see meetings that were horrible to go to. I mean, you'd want to slit your wrist if you had to go to this meeting. But I'll tell you that now that it's all online, you get, we used to get 10 people in a meeting maybe. Now you're getting up to 75 people that'll take the time to actually get online and be a participant, so I think that is a positive thing if we did that.
Amber, I'm just gonna throw this out for you because we're also deep into this. I think every single one of us is taking pages of notes at this point, but I'm guessing this will be one of the larger pieces of advice that have submits. I would say don't try and pick and choose, and if you can find a format to just submit everything so that we can go through it and figure out what fits both, and you can, give us all your ideas that you have for in person, but then also give us ideas that you have for virtual. And then we can take all that and make it work for our team.
Yeah, I actually really like this, the document that's up here that we could even put our recommendations in these subcategories, or unless there's others that we miss here, but we talked about success a little bit. I mean, I brought that up like, well, what's a successful meeting? That, sometimes a small group conversation, sometimes one-on-one interviews, sometimes it's a larger community gathering, but it's important we could fill some ideas out around that. We talked about digital engagement today. We can fill in some more there. We talked about format, location, how every community might be a little different and you got to target your message. We didn't talk a lot today about youth and other targeted communities, but I think we can work on that, right, as we develop the advice. I think we've had past, so Liz put in the chat the regional dialogue suggestions from 2018. I know the HAB's done other advice on public engagement, so maybe we need to pull out a couple of old advice pieces as well. But then the partnerships and the amplification. One thing I was going to say there is, a lot of the groups that are on the HAB, that have a seat on the HAB, like Heart of America or Hanford Challenge, we can partner to turn out people to the meetings. And so thinking about how we can work together and let us have a table at the meeting, but then, the TPA agencies have their own materials and their own information. But I think I've seen it work the best to get the most turnout and the most interested people when you partner with HAB members or local organizations. So I think we could fill out that section there too. But kind of what I'm envisioning for the advice would be taking the blue titles that you have on here, and then what you're saying is put a bunch of bullet points and suggestions underneath those. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, and I would say be as specific as you need to be. Like, don't try and make it broad and professional, right? Give us you think a 15-minute meeting is better than a 20. Like, give us all the details that you guys come up with.
That are not perfect.
Yes.
Well, and I think we could use language to get this through the full HAB, such as, and then, put a bunch of things so that we're not directing this is better than this, but, here are a bunch of things that we recommend, such as this. So, oh, Liz just said that wasn't advice. Sorry. TPA agencies needed the suggestions before the full board was meeting. Okay. So it came just from the committee. Got it. Thanks for the clarification, Liz.
And I shared it because there's no way you would find it you'd have to know to look for it and where it might be. So that's why I was like,
hopefully Josh, you're capturing the stuff from the chat. So thanks, Liz. It was in Liz's files. Thanks, Liz. But yes, it wouldn't have shown up in our list of advice. Okay. Any other thoughts about how in the next, we need to finish up this topic here in the next 10 minutes, 5 minutes, so we can take a break before the HEAL conversation? Josh, what else do we need to do to make sure we can get a draft going at our next meeting?
So that's as much a question for me as it is for you. So I guess the first thing we want to do is figure out who wants to collaborate on writing this first draft. Do we have an IM team lead that would like to volunteer? We need a IM team meeting scheduled. We do it offline. How do you feel as chair?
Well, I will be part of the group. I don't know if I have to be the lead, but I will definitely volunteer to be part of the group writing the advice. Is there other folks who want to be part of that group?
Yeah. Yeah, show of hands in the room. I don't mind.
I think Liz would be especially valuable because she's got the history.
Yeah, note that it doesn't have to be a committee member.
And IM team doesn't have to be a committee member, doesn't, it's just, it is just an ad hoc working group.
If you want to put my name down with me, I can try to help out.
Yeah, Liz, you've just got so much history on the topic.
Okay,
See,
so
then you
Liz/Mia, myself. How many people do you usually try and get together to draft something, Josh?
Typically, you want somebody to take the lead on it, and then we kind of work with as many volunteers as we get.
Well, I'll take the lead.
Amber, there is no one shoe fits all in this process. It's the one person can draft, do the initial draft and send it out to whoever's interested and move from there, or you can do group writing. It's whatever works for the committee. And we've had 2-person IM teams and 15-member IM teams. There is no set process.
Michelle, are you volunteering or do you have a comment?
I'm partially volunteering. If someone else will take the lead, I will endeavor to participate.
And we got Cherry.
And thank you for the volunteers. This is really important to me because I do want to build that trust within the community, because some days we're gonna have really good news to talk about, and other days we're gonna have more challenging. And so we need to find a way that we're communicating better and interacting with the community in a better way so that there's that trust there. I'd like to rebuild that. So I do think there's room for improvement, and I'm open to whatever suggestions that you have. So.
Well, and I'm gonna say on behalf of the board, but also myself, one of the things that over the last few years that we have been trying to do is have that open communication. If we understand what's going on, behind the curtain, both good and bad, we can be the site's best advocates, whether it be in helping with a different viewpoint on how it may be looked at or how it can be solved, but also in selling it to our fellow citizens and our organizations. But if we don't know, we can't help.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we ideally want to be, a partner with the site and the agencies.
Mm-hmm.
And so
And I don't want
thank
you
you for
to
coming.
be secrets, so if there are concerns, work through meeting, and I don't want, like I said, I don't want there to be secrets. There should be transparency.
Megan has been wonderful. Not gonna say
It's wonderful.
It's not been wonderful. It's just like, but this has been a work in progress over the last few years.
Mhm.
And so, yes, thank you.
Yes, Heather, thank you for wanting this information and wanting to be effective and to improve and get input from the board. So really appreciate that. Just one last thing, Josh, are we also supposed to be in this same piece of advice, providing feedback on Hanford's online information and website? I know that was another thing that we kind of wrapped into this. Do we want to, is that also what we're thinking, is it we'll have a section of the advice that gives feedback on the Hanford social media and website ways to improve and engage with community engagement and information?
Yeah, absolutely. I think throw it all in there.
I think that it just makes sense because, yeah, that's how you engage with people, and those are tools, and how you use them can be more effective or less effective. So I think we should wrap that in as just another subtitle or category on that sheet that we were just looking at. So
Yeah, this is the ESC advice that sounded like was getting rolled into this based on that workshop called Enhancing Public Messaging and Online Accessibility.
right. So I think it just makes sense to wrap that in, and we could make some recommendations because it's all interconnected, right? How you use videos and social media and the website to push out information is how can be more effective or less, can increase engagement or not. And so we can give some feedback on that as well. We didn't get into that much today, but we can take a stab at a draft of some ideas. And then when we bring it back to this committee, right, we can fill that out a little bit. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. So, what I will commit to doing is putting together a summary of the ideas that were expressed today in these categories. Getting that over to this IM team so they can see what they have, what their goals are, and we can figure out, take a stab at a draft, figure out if we need a call. To review, make sure we didn't miss anyone. The IM team members are Amber taking the lead. We have Michelle, we have Liz, Mia, who was voluntold, Gary. What else?
Include me.
All right, see you later.
Sounds good. So I'll circle up with Josh. We'll figure out next steps and if we want to have a call. And then we'll have the goal will be to have a draft to be discussed at the November meeting, correct? To get some more input and see if we missed anything. And then we'd want to introduce it for the January board meeting. Is that the time frame we're under?
And there's a note for the draft, the agenda for the November meeting is through September 30th, but we won't actually need to distribute anything until a couple weeks prior. So you have till, mid to late October to round that out.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thanks for all the great feedback, everyone. And we will have a more organized draft with all those ideas and others later in October, November. So then Josh, do we want to take just like a 10-minute break for folks in the room, or do they need a break?
Yeah.
I don't see our next presenter logged in yet, so I think we have a few minutes. What do you think on timeline, Ben?
Yeah, I was just gonna chat Chelsea to let her, give her an update on our break time now and then about when we'll return and stuff.
Because if we break now for 10 minutes, we could start at 11:35. So just 5 minutes after what we had anticipated. So yeah, if Chelsea's able to shift just a little bit, that would be awesome.
Yeah, if 11:35 is good with y'all, I'll send that to her.
Okay, quick break.
Thank you, everyone. I'm here. Are you here, Amber? I see you.
I'm here. All right. Are we ready to get started? Back again.
All right, Ben says yes.
Okay,
All right,
well, I'm Amber Waldriff. I'm the chair of this committee. I want to welcome, do we have Chelsea and Ben here to present?
Hi,
Hi there.
I'm here.
Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh,
Yes, we can,
is that Chelsea?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Chelsea. Did you want to introduce yourself? And thank you for being here today on our agenda. We really appreciate it.
Of course, thank you for the invitation. Ben or Ryan, did you all want to tee us up or do you want me to just launch right in?
Yeah, I'll get us started. We're joined here with Chelsea Batavia, who works for the Office of Environmental Justice at Washington Ecology for the past few months, several months, I would say. Maybe she's been working on an agency-wide community engagement plan. So today you'll hear about two plans. One is an agency-wide, ecology-wide community engagement plan. The other is a nuclear waste program specific community engagement plan, which I'll maybe shorten to the agency plan, or excuse me, the program plan. We have an agency plan and a program plan. The program plan is based off the agency plan, and Chelsea is still developing that agency plan or getting mostly at this stage tribal engagement and consultation for that. So you'll see some slides later that talks about timeline where the HAB's advice is valued in the program plan, in the nuclear waste program plan, and we'll get to that point at that point of the slide. Ryan, did you have anything to add for?
Yeah, I think Ben queued up very well. It's the HAB, the committee members are probably familiar with, this has been a topic with the committee for the last couple of years. And we've done a couple different presentations on like the HEAL Act and kind of Washington State's kind of initiatives around the step to help try and queue up the advice that we're requesting from the HAB. And so that kind of carried over to the current HAB work plan for the next fiscal year, that Ecology is requesting advice from the HAB on the program community engagement plan that Ben referenced. So to help inform the committee for that advice request, we have Chelsea here today to talk about the agency-wide plan. And so I think the opportunity for advice really is probably after this meeting and before we then works and we finalize the program plan. So we really want to make sure we have advice and feedback before that plan is finalized. So just to clarify, I know Ben said this, that the presentation today, a good chunk of it's on the agency-wide plan, and Ecology is not seeking feedback or advice from the HAB on the agency-wide plan. We are seeking advice on the program plan, but we're hoping this presentation can help provide some context and information and considerations for when we get your feedback on the program plan. And I'll kick it over to Chelsea if you had anything else that we missed.
That was great. Thank you.
And Chelsea, how much time do you have I know we had scheduled 45 minutes total. We started up about 11:35. So just checking in on your time for how long you can stay with us today.
Yeah, I'm flexible. So if you all have time, I think content probably have 20 to 25 minutes, and then happy to have discussion after that.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to aim to still stay on schedule. We covered some other stuff earlier in our meeting. So take it away. Thank you.
No, thank you. Yeah, and thanks, Ryan and Ben. You made me look good saying I've been working on this for a few months. I've been working on this since I started about 2.5 years ago, and it's been a slow process because of a lot of reasons, but this is a complex agency and this plan needs to do a few specific things for very different types of work, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But just to kind of round out the intro, Chelsea Batavia, she, her pronouns. My role is oh, sorry, Ben, you can stay right there. That's fine. My role is the Environmental Justice Engagement Coordinator, and I work in our Office of Equity and Environmental Justice, which is one of the administrative offices of the Department of Ecology. We have 11 environmental programs total, including nuclear waste program. And so this plan is meant to cover our entire agency, all of those 11 environmental programs. And so what you'll hear from me is it is a document that lays out our approach to community engagement, but it is by necessity and intention quite high level because it needs to be something that can be used in a wide range of contexts. So you'll get that big picture overview from me, and then Ben will talk, as he said, a little bit more about what is the plan for the nuclear waste program. And I think that's probably going to be most salient to your work going forward. But just to give you a little overview of Department of Ecology, I'll keep this brief because I know you all work with ecology, but I thought it might be helpful to just set up who we are. Thank you. So ecology, leaders in environmental protection and restoration. This agency was the first environmental agency in the US, actually before the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. We were established in 1970. I say we, I was not around in 1970 at ecology. But we do a lot of different work that is all designed to, promote environmental well-being and health. And there's a lot of work that we do to invest directly in communities, as well as engaging with our regulated communities. Next slide, please. Again, just a quick view. This is our an agency level. This is our vision and mission statement. Our vision is that our innovative partnerships protect and sustain healthy land, air, water, and climate in harmony with a strong economy. And then the mission is to protect, preserve, and enhance Washington's environment for current and future generations. And then our goals, if you go to the next slide, these are from Ecology's fairly newly launched 2025 to 2030 strategic plan. And we have 4 overarching goals for the agency: to support and engage our communities, customers, and employees. So that's the one that is most squarely aligned with the work you're going to hear about today. To reduce and prepare for climate impacts, prevent and reduce toxic threats and pollution, and protect and manage our state's waters. Next slide, please. And then just a couple more high levels overview slides about ecology. We do work statewide. I know Hanford, of course, in your work is most concentrated in the central and eastern region, but we do a wide variety of work all around the state. And we have 4 regional offices as well as several field offices. And then the agency is headquartered out of Lacey, and that's also where I'm stationed. Next slide, please. Okay, so the work we do is broad. A lot of it is regulatory. So we issue permits, do inspections and enforcement actions, a lot of rulemaking. We are a funding agency. We administer quite a lot of pass-through funds that go directly to communities. Sometimes we fund local and municipal governments. We fund tribal governments and regulated businesses at times. Of course, you all are very familiar with our cleanup work, not only at Hanford, but we have several of our programs touch on cleanup of polluted sites. We have a spills response program that focuses on spills response. We do shoreline protection and habitat restoration, water rights adjudication. We do data collection, monitoring, and research. And these are just, this list is not comprehensive. And then the last one I have listed here is environmental justice. Our environmental justice work at Ecology actually goes back decades. I'm saying we, again, before my time, but Ecology did the first statewide environmental justice analysis way back in 1995. So quite the track record. And environmental justice, it's listed as a standalone bullet here, but it is an area of work that we're trying to really integrate across all of our areas of work and all of our programs. And those efforts have been supported and formalized and given new structure under the State HEAL Act, the Healthy Environment for All Act. And that is also the main authorizing environment for the community engagement plan that you'll hear about today. So with that, I will pivot into talking about the HEAL Act and where we are coming from and what we're doing with our community engagement plan. This is a quick slide to give you a snapshot of the breadth of our requirements under the HEAL Act. We are a covered agency, so we're named explicitly along with, going to get the number wrong, it's 7 or 8 state agencies are covered. And then there are also a small handful of agencies that have opted into the HEAL Act. And the law requires us to incorporate environmental justice into a variety of agency activities, and the main categories are listed here. We do environmental justice assessments. We're supposed to incorporate environmental justice into our strategic planning. There's a whole provision of the law that focuses on equity in our budgeting and funding and expenditure decisions. There are specific requirements around tribal engagement and consultation. And then the part that we'll talk about most today are the requirements for community engagement. There are specific requirements for the agency to engage with our statutory language as overburdened communities and vulnerable populations. Those are terms that are defined in law. And we, under the HEAL Act, are required to engage with overburdened communities and vulnerable populations when we conduct environmental justice assessments. And then there are also a couple other contexts where the law calls on us to make sure that there are opportunities for meaningful involvement from those communities. But the HEAL Act also, in addition to those specific requirements to engage communities, requires covered agencies to develop and adopt an agency community engagement plan. And that is meant to establish our procedures and protocols and standards for equitable engagement that's accessible to overburdened communities and vulnerable populations. Thank you. You got me to my next slide. So here's the statutory language about this community engagement plan that describes how we'll engage with overburdened communities and vulnerable populations as we evaluate new and existing activities and programs. It needs to describe how we'll facilitate equitable participation and support the meaningful and direct involvement of vulnerable populations and overburdened communities. There are also some specific points about what the plan needs to include. I'm not going to go into those in detail, but overall, the law isn't prescriptive as to exactly how agencies need to fulfill these requirements of the HEAL Act, or how we need to address these requirements through our community engagement. So that's helpful in that it leaves a lot of room for agencies like Ecology to meet these requirements in law in ways that also meet our needs and are a good fit for the way that we work and the type of engagement that we do. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we do currently have an agency community engagement plan. This has been formally adopted or provisionally adopted, formally provisionally adopted since 2022. A little bit of backstory: in the HEAL Act, there are several requirements, statutory deadlines that covered agencies needed to meet. And this was actually one of the earliest one. By July 1st of 2022, agencies needed to have their community engagement plan. And so our plan was developed in collaboration with, there's an interagency work group of HEAL Act covered agencies. And so that group worked together to develop this, this plan, which, because it was developed by this collaboration of multiple agencies. This plan is very high level. It needed to have that kind of that common denominator that all agencies could work with. And that means that it has to stay quite general. So there's a lot of good high level content and kind of guiding star language, but it is not highly actionable for agencies that are working in their own specific context. So that was part of my charge when I started at the agency, was to kind of reformulate this plan into something that is more grounded in ecology's context and the type of work that we do. The other really key piece about this, that provisional adoption, the provisional draft plan, the reason for that is that the HEAL Act requires covered agencies to incorporate or to consider guidance from the State Environmental Justice Council. There's an Environmental Justice Council that the governor convenes. And so our community engagement plans are required to consider guidance that is released by that council. The thing is, on July 1st, 2022, the Environmental Justice Council had not yet been seated. And so clearly they couldn't have produced their guidance yet. And so agencies needed to meet that statutory deadline. But we just provisionally adopted the plan to make that placeholder and say, okay, this is in place, but we are also waiting for the EJC, the Environmental Justice Council, to release their guidance, which they did about a year later. And so that's also part of our update process to incorporate that guidance. You can go to the next slide, please. So as I just said, that's a large part of the impetus for updating the plan to incorporate the guidance that was released from the Environmental Justice Council. I mentioned we're trying to improve our fit with the Department of Ecology, and then also because the timing aligned nicely with the release of our strategic plan at the agency, there was an opportunity to create those connections and then kind of leverage that nexus in developing a plan that would help to advance a community engagement plan that would help to advance ecology strategic plan. Next slide, please. So what's new? Pretty much everything. Artificial language is update, but this is the plan in operational terms has been rewritten. And the kind of some key highlights about the new pieces are the process guidance. There's a new framework for engagement that is meant to be creating standards and consistency in how we approach engagement, but also allow flexibility for programs, because as I mentioned before, we do have a broad and diverse array of work at the agency. There are new best practices that, again, create those standards to align us around these practices that will help us to integrate equity, access, and inclusion into our engagement. And then there's also a new section that focuses specifically on direction for programs to implement this plan. It gives a roadmap and some structure for how we're going to actually use this plan at the agency. So hopefully that'll help us to take it forward, and it won't just be a government document sitting on the shelf. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I'll give you a little bit more information about the community engagement plan, but before doing that, next slide, thank you. Just wanted to echo what Ben mentioned before. At this time, the plan is out for tribal review. We've invited consultation for all the tribes in the state. We're planning 2 listening sessions for tribes. Those will be held in late September and early October, and we've asked tribes to provide any input by early November. And once we've received tribal input, we will go through, we will make revisions to incorporate their input and then finalize the plan and release it at the agency and publicly. So I just want to put that caveat out there that what I'm sharing today is sort of a sneak preview. This is what's in the plan right now, but it is subject to change in response to input that tribes share through this consultation process. Next slide, please. Thank you. Overview of what's in the plan, 3 main parts. Part 1 is our overview, just what you would expect for the introduction, background, the authorizing environment, and some key concepts. Part 2 is the implementation guide, and then part 3 is that process guidance and best practices. How do we actually do? How are we going to do community engagement? I'll walk a little bit through each of these things. Just wanted to give some of the vocabulary and frameworks that we use in the community engagement plan. I'm not going to go into depth right now. If you have questions, I'm happy to talk more about this in the discussion. But we do we provide a framework and definition for meaningful engagement that leans on that guidance that our State Environmental Justice Council provided. That's the way that we are operationalizing our understanding of meaningful engagement, is relying on their values and guidance. We establish in the plan the importance of understanding barriers to meaningful engagement, and that's drawing largely on work that was completed back in 2019 by the Environmental Justice Task Force, which was actually a direct precursor to the HEAL Act itself. And they had done an outreach and collaborative process to identify some main barriers to engagement. So we lean on that work and then also supplement with the experience of staff at Ecology to come up with kind of a list of some of the major barriers to meaningful engagement that we're aware of and need to address to promote equity and access. And then the last one is the spectrum of engagement. This is drawing on a couple of sources. There's the spectrum of community engagement ownership by facilitating power, and then International Association for Public Participation, IEB2, they have a spectrum. So we did a little bit of a mashup of those two. You can go forward now, Ben, thanks. So this is the spectrum that we use. And basically what this does is describe different goals for engagement that we might seek to achieve, from kind of this lowest level that is less intensive for communities, but also means that they have less opportunity to provide input and shape whatever the action or context or decision is. That's on the left side, up to on the right side, this very intensive engagement that requires a lot of capacity and resources, but also affords a lot of opportunity for communities to influence. So, inform would be where we are providing information. Consult is we prepare something and we send it out and we ask people to give us feedback. Involve is a little bit more of a partnership, bringing people into a process along the way. Collaboration is even more like a partnership. People like communities are involved in setting the scope, defining the problem, laying out the process for engagement, really all the way through. It's more of a reciprocal partnership. And then finally, empower, when decision making is afforded directly to the communities. So this spectrum is an important frame of reference for us. It gives us some shared vocabulary for describing, like at a high level and in general terms, how we're engaging, and also what are our goals for engagement at the agency. For us, we're really trying to lean into this concept of meaningful involvement, and this is me editorializing a little bit, but I think engagement can be meaningful at any of these levels, as long as we are addressing communities' needs and interests in ways that are meaningful to them, that are culturally relevant, that are accessible, that are interesting, and addressing their priorities. But there is a sense in which when we talk about meaningful engagement, we're referring to engagement that has a chance to meaningfully shape outcomes or decisions. And so usually meaningful engagement in that sense of the word occurs at these higher levels, involve, collaborate, and empower. And so again, this spectrum gives us the shared language for sort of talking about that and strategizing around it. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I'm going to go into what's in our process guidance, this how do we do community engagement. And the cornerstone of our process guidance is this 4-part framework: scope, plan, implement, and evaluate. And really the goal is at every step to be thoughtful and intentional and strategic about at least considering or asking what are the equity or environmental justice implications, what are the potential barriers to meaningful engagement, and then incorporating strategies or practices that will help to address those barriers and support the involvement of overburdened communities and vulnerable populations. So scoping is an initial process that just helps us to determine through a kind of structured assessment exercise what general level of engagement is appropriate in our context, and that's referring to the engagement spectrum that we just talked about. Planning translates that high-level strategy, that high-level goal, into a detailed project-specific plan for engagement. Implementation is implementing our plan, and then evaluation is actually wrapped into both planning and implementation, but it's important enough that we call it out separately. So we're creating structure to collect both internal staff feedback as well as feedback from the communities who we're engaging, just to help promote our improvement of practices and also enhance accountability and transparency. Next slide, please. Best practices complement. There are best practices for each of those 4 parts of our framework. There are 33 of them, which is a lot. This is just to give you a snapshot of some of what kind of best practices we're talking about for scoping, planning, implementation, and evaluation. I won't go into depth right now just for the sake of time. I will say the best practices, they are still quite high level. They're pretty generalized. And that is for the reason that I was trying to write best practices that could be tailored to our wide variety of contexts. So it's really going to be up to the programs to take these best practices and determine what it means to put them into action and do that adaptation and tailoring. Next slide, please. There are also a lot of resources to support the 4 steps of our framework. We have worksheets and templates for scoping, planning, and evaluation. guidance for how to identify overburdened communities and vulnerable populations, an analysis to identify barriers and strategies to address them, a long table of some common outreach and engagement activities, and a lot more. So again, one of my main objectives with this was to give our employees something that is useful and actionable. And so trying to provide some of those more tangible resources. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I'm going to go into what is actually part 2 of the plan, which is what is implementation. Big picture implementation in the community engagement plan is envisioned at 2 different levels, programmatic and project level. I'm actually going to talk about project level first. And what that means is following the process guidance and the best practice. So following that 4-step framework, scope, plan, implement, evaluate in specific contexts or projects. So in the plan, I differentiate a couple general categories of projects or contexts: HEAL compliance and what in the plan we refer to as discretionary, which just means not HEAL compliance projects. Next slide, please. And the reason for that is because given that this plan is directly authorized by the HEAL Act, we really want to hold it to the standards for equity and access and inclusion that are in this plan, especially in our HEAL Act compliance contexts and projects. So it's basically the plan is establishing that these are areas, these are projects where it's a really high priority for us to follow the process guidance and best practices. And so again, I mentioned earlier that there are specific community engagement requirements in the HEAL Act, and these are our HEAL compliance projects where we're going to do our best to strongly encourage, there's no requirement, this is a guidance document, we're going to strongly encourage our employees to follow the process guidance in these types of HEAL compliance projects. But Ecology does, oh, you can go back, thank you. Ecology does a lot of other type of outreach and engagement. And so for purposes of this plan, those are all defined as discretionary project. And that would be things like, public involvement or public notice, public comment periods, all variety of environmental outreach, like a lot of what Ben and Sarah and Ryan do at Hanford, environmental education, kind of more formal or informal curricula around environmental topics. We do behavior change campaigns to promote environmentally friendly behaviors. We also do community engagement outside of the HEAL Act compliance context. So I keep saying this, broad variety of work, and some of these types of projects have their own authorizing environment that has environmental justice or equity requirements, but some don't. And so the goal of the plan is that even when there are not legal compliance obligations to consider environmental justice, we want to at least be considering to take that voluntary proactive step to ask, are there environmental justice considerations that we should be thinking about and planning for? Are there equity considerations? Are there barriers that we need to address? At the same time, we know that the agency and communities have limited capacity and resources, and so we need to be able to prioritize. We can't and probably don't need to do kind of full-blown enhanced community engagement in every single context. And so the plan gives some strategy for thinking through different considerations that will allow us to determine when it's more important to really lean into equity, leaning into addressing barriers to engagement, and when we can maybe scale back or follow more of a business as usual approach. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, as I said, at the project level, implementation is just following this this framework and incorporating applicable best practices. Next slide, please. But for discretionary projects, so outside of the HEAL Act, one of the ways that I've built some flexibility into this plan is by providing this pre-assessment tool that gives programs a way to think through, are there environmental justice considerations that we need to be aware of that would mean that it's more important for us to follow the process guidance in the community engagement plan. Next slide, please. So this is kind of a chaotic and horrible slide with lots of text, and don't worry about looking at the visual, but just to show you, there's this 4-factor analysis, and the overall logic is asking, legally, do we have an obligation to engage environmental justice communities? If yes, then the direction is follow that authority, or If not, then you ask yourself, potentially, could this project or activity that I'm doing, could it potentially impact communities with environmental justice consideration who face barriers to engagement? And if so, would those impacts be more than minimal? And if you get to a yes for any of these, then the recommendation in the plan is to follow the process guidance. In other words, start that step one of scoping. And if you get to a no for any of these, then it's like, okay, we can this is lower priority and we can scale back, reserve our resources, reserve our capacity for higher priority contexts. Next slide, please. If you do get to that yes and you move into the scoping, there's also a bit of an off-ramp or a scaling framework in the scoping process itself that allows us to, again, determine when it's a higher priority to really focus on removing barriers to engagement and when it's a lower priority. Next slide, please. And the way that we do this is by providing this framework that looks at two main factors. How much could this project impact overburdened communities and vulnerable populations? And then also, how much opportunity does the community have to influence the project through their engagement? And so on the right, this figure is showing these 4 quadrants, and based on whatever combination of influence and impact, you will either, in this lower left-hand quadrant, it'll be like the 1+ means like this is lower priority, less intensive engagement is appropriate. Whereas if you have up on the top right quadrant, if you have a project where there's a really significant impact and there's a lot of opportunity for community engagement to shape the project, that's when you really go full throttle, lean into meaningful engagement, lean into addressing barriers. Okay, I am getting there. Next slide, please. That was project level implementation. Now, just to circle back to this programmatic implementation. So this is about defining more of the overall strategy or approach or plan for engagement in our environmental programs. Next slide, please. And so at the project level, what I was just talking about, our implementation is saying, okay, in this specific instance, for this project, for this activity or context, this is what we're going to do for community engagement. Programmatic implementation is where the program is defining what our engagement looks like overall. And so I expect programs are going to approach this differently, and that's good and as it should be and expected. But some of the elements that I have envisioned, probably a lot of these plans might include, are an overview of what types of outreach and engagement the programs do, roles and responsibilities, identifying the types of discretionary project where the program's going to implement the community engagement plan, and then tailoring some of the process guidance and best practices and resources. And I see this being a really important communication tool, both internally to promote alignment in the program around the engagement work that's happening, but also externally for communities and the public to understand the sorts of engagement opportunities that are available. And I know, as Ben mentioned, he's been leading this work, and so I am going to hand it over to him now to tell you more about nuclear waste.
Yeah, thanks, Chelsea. So when we put on our glow-colored glasses for this and apply it to the nuclear waste program, we'll be using these types of scoping, planning, assessments in order to make the most for our community here in the Tri-Cities, Central Washington, and across the Pacific Northwest. So when I think, and our team thinks of our goal of what community outreach and engagement looks like, we look to connect people potentially impacted by nuclear waste to resources, information to pursue meaningful involvement in ecology's decision-making process. So the main driver of what we want to see in terms of a metric is people getting involved in the decision-making process from ecology's perspective in order to have their voices heard on what's happening out at the Hanford site or with nuclear waste program projects. In terms of specific objectives that we look to do, we look to broaden Hanford awareness across the region, reach new audiences, understand community needs and meet those community needs, reinforce ecology's value for all of us that live in Washington or across the Pacific Northwest, and then similar to what I mentioned earlier, continue to establish that buy-in for communities to provide comments into our, for public comment periods. In terms of key audiences that we are looking to engage, or that we do engage currently, we have, we look at all residents of Washington. Some considerations we have are language access, so Spanish-speaking communities or non-English speaking communities, historically underrepresented communities, low-income students, including K through 12 and college and university, elected officials, special interest organizations and NGOs, as well as here the Hanford Advisory Board, either through the subcommittee or the board as a whole. And in terms of non-governmental organizations, so like a nonprofit. And then in terms of how we're going to do this, we look to engagement in public events, resource fairs, which could be health fairs or job fairs, invited talks, classroom education, so back to the K through 12 university or college, community focus groups, as well as virtual opportunities all around. So we have a few next steps in terms of what the timeline for rollout is, and I'll pass it back to Chelsea to talk about the agency-wide plan.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So for us, as I mentioned, we're currently in tribal consultation and engagement, likely through early November. Depending on the scope of the input that we received from tribes, we're being flexible with our timeline, but tentatively I'm aiming to release the plan internally at our agency in early December, and then public release tentatively in early January. And then I am planning a prolonged period of public and community engagement for a year plus, and still envisioning what that's going to look like. I will be developing a community engagement plan for the community engagement plan, if that makes any sense. But trying to be very thoughtful about what the public is going to be interested in for this high-level agency plan, and ways to present this work in a way that makes clear the relevance to communities and also invites them in to provide their input in ways that will help to inform both the way that we implement the plan at the agency, and then also always keep an eye to future updates. Probably in about 2 years, we'll open this back up and incorporate learnings from this public and community engagement period, as well as what we learned through our internal rollout. And then I think Ben was going to tell you about the nuclear waste timeline.
Yeah, so again, shifting back to the program community engagement plan that our team is developing. In terms of timeline for that, we have our agency-wide plan and briefing here to COE. You are here in September. This could look like the next steps could be an IM team holds these team meetings to draft advice within the next month or within the next month and a half. COE drafts that advice for edits and potentially pass that on to the full board in November. And then the full board considers advice for consensus in January. So this is how we would recommend the process moving forward, to make sure that the HAB's views and thoughts are incorporated into the program plan that I'm developing.
And that schedule's kind of aligned with the rollout plan that we did at the HAB workshop a couple weeks ago with mostly board leadership and some other board members. But of course, it's not hard and fast. I think if the board needs more time to develop it, certainly we're open to that.
And that's all Chelsea and I have. We're open to thoughts, ideas, and questions.
Jerry, I'll wait till if there are committee members that want to go first.
Are there committee members going first? I think you're clear there. Okay.
I had a lot of involvement in the development of the HEAL Act and supervised the Department of Health and the UJ Council graduate students who tested the use of the DOH mapping tool and other mapping tools. And there's been a lot of criticism. This applies specifically to Hanford as an example, and some of the other Superfund sites. That the designation, the key to consideration of overburdened communities and impacts and whether you're triggered under the HEAL Act or involvement is whether you're an overburdened community under, as designated by looking at the Department of Health's screening map. The Department of Health screening map is based on residential census tracts. Now, I work a lot with the Akamai Nation, for example, or with the C2IR. Well, they're residing in what are undeniably overburdened communities. There's no capturing of the fact that tribal and immigrant communities utilize resources, treaty rights or subsistence fishing, etc., that are far from the census tract mapped by DOH. And so when you look at Hanford, for example, it's not an overburdened community, doesn't trigger anything. But you look at ceded lands and treaty rights, and you've got massive impacts. And so the Hanford specific plan, at least, and I would say actually all the Superfund sites, state Vermont sites, need to include some sort of recognition of whether or not, for example, there are treaty protected cultural and food and other resources that are impacted, and apply all the same tools to that. And I raise this because we've already had interactions with ecology where ecology said, you're not in no burden community when you're talking about Hanford as it's being designated. But if you have a treaty right to live along and fish at Columbia, along the Columbia River, gather plants, you obviously have a huge, in fact, the foremost impacts are going to be on people exercising those treaty rights. So how will that be incorporated both for the nuclear waste program and statewide plan? And obviously, this is not just for treaty rights, but it applies. I work with the Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition, for example, the Duwamish River, where people use the Duwamish for subsistence that aren't just in the census tracts right alongside the Duwamish.
Yeah, thanks. So in terms of how the nuclear waste program looks to incorporate tribal input and input from indigenous communities, we will have a public comment period, not only for the general public, but beforehand, we will work with them to share our plans similar to how we're working with the Have Now, so that their ideas, thoughts, and considerations are input into that. And that kind of goes into that, spectrum of engagement, getting them beyond the inform and move them into the collaborate and hear from them, because these are the things that they're going to be most concerned about, and we want to make sure that that voice is heard.
I appreciate you're trying to answer, but I don't think that you're answering kind of my question. And I apologize if I can reframe it maybe. Will there be special carve out essentially saying for sites, ONCA Superfund sites, where you have exposures of people who are not living right next to the site, but utilize resources that are impacted, where you will have recognized that and, for example, utilize an exposure scenario, make a commitment that your exposure scenario will recognize their greater exposure, which goes to the substance of the HEAL Act, and getting input from people who might live 40 miles away about how they will be exposed to the site.
Yeah, I think we're still in the early stages of the program plan, but Chelsea, did you have any perspective on Derek's
Yeah.
question for the?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And this is a really important topic that there has been a lot of conversation on in the interagency spaces. I am going to put a big disclaimer that I'm not the expert on these elements, but there are groups of people who've been talking specifically about the environmental health disparities map, which is on the verge of being updated right now, but then also more broadly around this topic of how do covered agencies under the HEAL, how do we identify overburdened communities and vulnerable populations? What does that mean? And I'm forgetting if it's specifically in the statutory language or if it's in some of the guidance we've developed, but I know there is at least a heuristic that when we are identifying overburdened communities and vulnerable populations, we're not only looking for communities or populations who reside in some specific vicinity of an area, it's also people who exercise treaty rights, people who work in an area, people who recreate in an area. So I think we're trying to broaden that scope out to make sure we are accounting for the full range of the way that people might interact with a geographic area. I'll add also that the environmental health disparities map, again, lots of conversation about this, but we're trying to really emphasize that it is, at least at Ecology, we're trying to emphasize that that is one tool to be used alongside and triangulated with other sources of data, both data that's available in sort of large kind of statewide or local data sets, but then also complementing with local knowledge, lived experience, the insights of community partner organizations, any source of information that we can find that will help us understand what the impacts are and who is impacted, and making sure that if there are groups of people who would not be represented effectively if we followed a kind of agency business as usual approach, that we are taking efforts to promote access and inclusion for those groups of people. I don't know if that helped address some of your question. And I would also say these are ongoing conversations at the state, well, in the interagency space.
I think it's encouraging to hear that you're recognizing that.
There's also one of so the interagency work group is an entity, and then there are sub teams within that. And one of the groups is our tribal liaisons working group. So the tribal affairs representatives from the covered agencies. And I know that this is a topic that they have also been discussing at length. And I unfortunately, I apologize, I don't know the current status, but there has at least been conversation around revisiting the environmental health disparities map with and engaging and consulting with tribes in that process, because we know that there are challenges with the map, and especially around how tribal lands are represented on the map. So again, I don't know what the status of that is, but I do know that it has been a lively source of conversation.
Sort of a related question. Are those sort of considerations along the lines of the input being sought from the head?
For the program plan, what's happening?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I mean, I see the hab as, one of the key parts of bringing the community, through a way to communicate directly to the tri parties, and we value all of that feedback and all that input to make it the best that we can, not only for our state, but for our specific communities. So for what we're looking for from the hab, from the program plan, are those suggestions of what matters to your communities, to your constituents, what matters, how do they gather, how can ecology get the best use of our efforts to make sure that the goals of the communities are met, the needs of the communities are met, in order to fulfill these HEAL Act requirements and fulfill environmental justice in our work.
I think that's why we're pursuing to engage with the HAP. Why we've been engaging on it early, too, is to try and get advice and feedback to incorporate into this draft before we even have a draft that we'll send out, like public comment stuff, to try and get early engagement with you guys. So that's part of the intent, is to get your early feedback and input on it.
So, but you're trying to get feedback on the program specific.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
No, I think Jerry asked some good questions, and that's probably where we want to go with like giving recommendations around, looking at Hanford and what are the disproportionately impacted communities, not just along the river or in the Tri-Cities area or along the Columbia Gorge, but also transportation routes that go through low income and disproportionately impacted communities like in Spokane. So those are some things we could discuss in terms of feedback to the program, thinking about those communities differently and shaping the outreach and engagement differently. So we're getting close on time here. We've got 3 more minutes to our meeting. Josh, what other things do we need to do, or Ryan, what do we need to form a subgroup that's going to give feedback and start drafting advice?
I think so, right, Don?
Yeah, so as Ben put back on the screen, the ecology preferred timeline would be looking at a draft advice and editing it in the COE committee in November. So in order to meet that, we would need to have a draft prepared. So similarly to the previous advice we talked about, want to put together a team and figure out the path forward to develop that draft.
Yeah, and I'll recognize and know that's a very ambitious timeline. So if you guys start meeting as an IM team and those kind of considerations, and you're finding you're not gonna have like a draft to bring in November, then, and you want to use November to solicit like committee feedback and then push it back a little bit, that's okay too.
Well, I think that the advice could be a lot shorter on this topic compared to what we were just discussing, which was a lot of feedback on community meetings and virtual meetings. And obviously all of that advice could be helpful to your community engagement plan as well, right, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely.
On effective outreach and engagement strategies like we talked about earlier this morning.
Yeah, that kind of stuff's always helpful, not for all the work.
But this is kind of honing in on making sure we're not leaving communities out, that we're really being intentional.
Yes, true.
Okay. Well, do we have anyone that has energy that would be able to lead this group to at least start drafting up something for November?
Amber, is Jerry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm willing to, I actually came to the meeting not to volunteer for the other one, but if this is going to be on the agenda.
Okay.
But I think it is vitally important that any IM team meet with the affected tribes in developing any advice and do some outreach with other highly impacted vulnerable communities in the region, and not just do this in a
I agree.
vacuum.
And I mean, to be honest, I think that's really important. And so therefore, this may take more time, Ryan, to give really meaningful advice, but we can see about how much can be done before November, right, Jerry? It just may take some extra time to do the due diligence.
Susan was just pointing out that none of the tribes are here today.
Even online.
Well, not a half number, but we do have at least one travel representative. So I guess for the team, we have one volunteer so far, we have Jerry. Who else wants to participate? It's a thin attendance, so I think you're gonna be the default leader, Amber.
We might have to follow up after this to other committee members to see if we have some more volunteers.
Yeah, I was thinking of, so for each of these teams, I was thinking of putting out an announcement in our weekly update, actually getting a little bit more interest.
That sounds good. And Jerry, I could help identify a couple organizations or folks in Spokane, along I-90 and some of the highly impacted neighborhoods. Like I could help with identifying a few folks you could connect with for feedback. I don't know if that's kind of what you are also interested in.
I think it's important.
But since I'm the lead on the other committee, I'm thinking I probably shouldn't volunteer for this one, but I can help connect you with folks to do the pre-work, to do the outreach and get input directly from highly impacted communities. So I think we're going to have to rally a few more folks to join you, Jerry. I know sometimes that happens where we don't have all the participants in our meeting on this call. So Josh, you'll help me with that, with getting some more volunteers for each committee?
Do my best.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chelsea and Ben, for your presentations. I learned a lot and it was excellent. And as you get more detailed and have more conversations at a statewide level, we'd love to have you back with any more updates.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was wonderful to see this group. I hear you referenced often, so it's nice to put faces to names and appreciate the time. And yeah, happy to come back anytime.
Thank you, Ryan, for helping get this organized on the agenda, and Ben, appreciate it. Okay, are we ready to adjourn for today? And Josh and I will work on getting folks engaged in the teams to work on drafting advice, and we'll see where we get for November on the feedback on the program. Solid, the waste program community engagement plan. We'll do our best on that. Anything else for the good of the order, or can we adjourn?
Not seeing any hands. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for all your engaged participation. I appreciate all the agency participation and all the committee members, and we will see you again soon. And expect to hear from Josh as a follow-up, asking for more participants and probably at least one phone call for the team that's going to be working on the advice, each piece of advice. Thank you.
Thank you.